All right, so don't worry about the 04 and the 1. This is basic electricity. Here we go. So the thing about so just in case somebody's watching on YouTube tonight, so you need to take notes so that you can answer an open note quiz tomorrow. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please interrupt me. Call my name, raise your hand, say yo, 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 whatever you need to get my attention. And I'd be very happy to stop and answer your questions. So before I get started into that basic electricity, I want to talk about why electricity, you don't have to write this part down, but why is electricity so important to aircraft mechanics? And does anybody have any idea besides me? It's not that I know all the answers, I just know all the answers to the questions that I bring to class. So it makes it look like I know all the answers. Don't ask me the meaning of life. I didn't bring that answer with you. How about a car? Let's talk about being a car mechanic. Is it helpful if you know electricity to fix cars? Why is that? Because there's a battery in a car. What else? Is there anything electrical besides a battery in a car? Lights. What else? Computers. Yeah, there's tons of stuff. Same thing in airplanes. There's batteries and lights and tons of things that work off electricity. In fact, the Boeing 787, which is the latest airplane that Boeing has put out, they replaced all the hydraulic systems and put electrical parts in. And they replaced the compressed air systems and put in electrical. So that airplane, almost everything on it runs off of electricity. But even a 1969 airplane today, now that it's 50 years old, a 50-year-old airplane built in the United States has hundreds of wires on it. And you can't even get the engine started without electricity. And the engine itself needs electricity to fire the spark plugs. So what we're going to do in this class, I discussed it with Mr. Luque, we're going to start some basic electricity, have a couple of labs so we can get used to what electricity is in wires. And then we're going to dive into the electrical system that makes an engine, a gasoline engine run, and that's the ignition system, the spark plugs and the magnetos, all the parts that make the spark plugs fire so the engine will run. Then for the Valley ROP Tiger romp, you're going to get split into 3 teams, and you're going to do something you've been practicing in lab. You're going to do that contest. And then the first place winners, I think you get, I think it's a dozen boiled eggs, ready to go Easter colored. The problem is it'd still be too far till Easter, so you probably have to eat them. And then I haven't figured out what second and third prize are going to be. I don't. You can suggest a prize such as $1 million. I highly recommend you not hold your breath. So the first thing we're going to cover in electricity is electrons. If you haven't had physics or much science in high school, then you don't know what that is. If you have had some physics or science in high school, you might have a clue. It's a really, really, really small particle down at the molecular level, actually the atomic level. And electrons spin around and they move in wires at the speed of light. So you don't have to write down 186,000 miles per second. But electrons move in a wire so fast we can't notice it as a human. It's instantaneous. You flip on a light switch, the only thing that took time was moving the switch. Or if you got a fluorescent light, it gets delayed. So you can't even notice how fast it goes. So you go to the moon and back in 3 seconds. If you had a wire all the way to the moon and it came all the way back, you'd flip the switch, the light would come on at the moon in 1.5 seconds. Because it's only 1.5 seconds, so that's pretty fast. All right. Electrons are negatively charged. If you have your choice, we only have 3 kinds of charges: positive and negative and neutral. We don't really care about neutral because we're talking about the electrons. If an electron is negatively charged, then that means it will be attracted to some place that's positively charged. That old saying, opposites attract, is correct in this case, that negatively charged electrons are attracted and want to go where it's positively charged. Wait, where is something that's positively charged? A place that's positively charged is where there are not enough electrons. So we're going to see how well I can draw with my pen today. So if we have the nucleus of an atom, and we have electrons spinning around in orbit, and we have another one. Here's our electron. This electron if it's negatively charged and this electron is negatively charged, it's not attracted. In fact, negative and negative repel. But if I grab this electron and I push it away and I grab it so it's not there anymore, then if I had a neutron and a proton and a proton, protons are positively charged. So this place right here where there is a lack of a negative electron, then this whole atom right here becomes positively charged, and this electron is going to be attracted to it. If we have a negative electron over here and we push it in this direction, a negative and a negative repel each other. This negative electron over here is actually going to push on this electron and try to get it to shove over and shove over and shove over. So literally, here's this wire, and if we shove electrons in one end and we pull or suck electrons out of the other end, we can make all the electrons in this wire start to move. That's the basis of electricity. Of course, how many people have seen an electron? You just close one eye and squint, right? Oh yeah, there it is. It's that little tiny. Okay, a couple of you are almost grinning. That's really good. A couple of you are almost grinning. If you're new, I'm going to suggest to Mr. Luque, if he's teaching tomorrow, to have an open note quiz on today's lecture. So my recommendation is to take lots of notes. Good news is I'm posting this on YouTube. Yes. So you thought I wasn't going to. Okay, fine. All right, so electron flow, there's two things that electron flow does. Let's see if I can find this place to erase them all. Ta-da. So when electrons are moving through a wire, a couple of things happen. Number one is the conductor or the wire. Conductor is just another name for wire. The wire starts getting warmer. Now, the bigger the wire, the less warm. The smaller the wire, the warmer it gets. So if you want to have wires and you want electricity in them without getting too hot, you need to get a big enough wire. So that's one thing that always occurs. If electrons are moving, whatever they're moving in is going to get warmed up. Some of the electrical power, some of the electrical energy is going to be used up by the wire. It's usually a really, really, really small percent, like way less than 1%. In fact, less than 0.5%, usually less than 1/10 of 1%. But some of that energy is used up in the wire, and that's why it gets hot. So has anybody ever, I'm trying to think, did you ever plug a blow dryer in and run it for a long time, and you found that the wire, the cord going to the outlet was warm? Okay, I use blow dryers every day just to make sure my beard is in the right spot. And so I notice that every now and then I'll grab the wire. The wire isn't hot because the heat of the blow dryer is going into the wire. It's because lots and lots of electrons are going through the wire. That's why it gets hot. In fact, that's why a blow dryer gets hot. It's just got a wire inside it that is designed to get hot, and that's where it uses up its electricity. That wire inside the blow dryer. You ever look in there and you see the bright red wire? Okay, that's just a conductor. That's just a wire. The other thing electrons cause is when the electrons are moving, you turn the wire into a magnet. Technically, it's an electromagnet because it's not a permanent magnet. It's not like the permanent magnet you buy at the dime store and you drag it to the dirt, you pull it up, you find iron filings. It's an electromagnet. So that wire turns into a magnet, but only when the electrons are moving. If you turn the switch off and no electrons are moving through the wire, it doesn't have any lines of flux. It's not a magnet anymore, and it won't pick up any nails. I remember back in the 1940s when I was in high school, we did this thing. Thanks for grinning, because I really went to high school in the 1930s, but I'm trying to sound younger than I really am. We took wires and wrapped them around a nail and then hooked the wire up to a 1.5 volt battery and then tried to figure out how many paper clips we could pick up with the nail. Well, it would have worked even without the nail. We could have picked up paper clips. The more electrons you push through a wire, the stronger the magnet. I'm going to say that again. The more the electrons go through a wire, the stronger that magnetic force becomes. If you double the number of electrons, you can double the strength of that magnet. Now there's two types of electricity, and in fact it's not a well-known story about the beginning of the rock band AC/DC. They were all in electrical, Catherine is smiling, they were all in electrical engineering school in Australia, and they decided to form a band, a rock band, a heavy rock. Well, back then they didn't have acid metal or anything like the good stuff nowadays. They didn't even have thrash metal back then. Can you believe that? There was a time in the universe that there was no thrash metal. I know your whole world is collapsing right now. But before there was thrash metal, there was only hard rock. There was like Led Zeppelin and AC/DC, and of course AC/DC was before Van Halen, but that's another story. We're not going to talk about Van Halen too much today. We're just going to talk about AC/DC, and they were trying to figure out the name of their band, and some of these guys, they were all guys, were working on alternating current in school, that's AC, and the others were more interested in DC circuits, DC or direct current. And they couldn't decide the way they wanted to name their band, so they named their band AC/DC with the hash mark in there. Matthew's grinning, and he's like going, yeah, that's so awesome. So the two kinds of electricity are AC and DC. So I want to draw some pictures about DC here. So DC, if we have a battery, I'm going to draw the symbol for a battery so you'll start getting used to it. We have a light bulb and a switch. This is a really, really nice, simple electrical circuit. If I draw a battery, you know, it's long, short, long, short. The short side is negatively charged, and the long side is positively charged. So on a battery, if I drew a regular battery, it would look like this, because that's the plus side and that's the negative side, right? Isn't that the way batteries are? AA batteries, D batteries, stuff like that? Yes? Okay. All right. So that's the way the battery's set up. And here's an electrical switch. Right now this is open, which is the same thing as off. Because I just pretend I've lifted this metal spot up, and the electrons cannot jump across this air. And this right here is a light bulb. And then, of course, there's all the wires, which is the same thing if you want to call it a conductor. If electricity will go through it pretty easily, it's a conductor. You ever notice wires have something around them so you don't get to see the metal, you don't get to touch the metal? That's an insulator. It's usually made out of rubber or plastic. But electricity does not go through rubber or plastic very easily. That's called an insulator. And when we get out in the shop, you're going to see all the wires in the airplane except for one or two have, which ones? The one that connects the negative side of the battery to the fuselage. Because just like in your car, if you've ever worked on a car battery, the negative side of the battery has a cable, a big wire that attaches to the metal of the car. You don't really need the plastic insulation on it. It's all of the car is hooked to the negative side of the battery. And so there's some airplanes that they just connect the battery straight to the fuselage, the metal fuselage, with a bare wire that doesn't have an insulation on it. All right, so if it's direct current means the electrons only go one way. Electrons are negatively charged. The way I like to think about it is that the negative side of the battery down here, it has a lot of electrons. And the positive side, electrons have been sucked out of it, so there's not enough electrons. So the positive side is positively charged. So if you're an electron, there's only one thing you want to do, and that's be in the amplifier on stage at an AC/DC concert. Okay, most people aren't getting that one. Fine. So if you're an electron, you want to go from the other thing electrons want to do, even more than that, is go from where there's too many electrons and go to where there's not enough. They are attracted, opposites attract. So if I take this switch and I close the switch, so now it's closed, which is the same thing as on. We'll not worry about this piece right there. Then these negative electrons have a path. They can go through the wire in the light bulb. Come on, pull up a chair. Go through the wire and go to the positive side of the electron. So this electron Literally, watch this, man. It's going to be cool. This electron disappears, goes through the wire, and it fills up one of these spots and makes it less positively charged. That means the battery just discharged a little bit. I just pulled some power out of it, and it's not fully charged anymore. So I leave this thing on, and another electron leaves the battery and goes through the wire, through the light bulb. The light bulb goes bright, through the wire to the battery over here, and it's a little bit less positively charged. So over and over and over again, these electrons are going to leave the negative side, go to the positive side, and after a while, there's not very many extra electrons to go through here, and the battery's dead. If it's a rechargeable battery, and I stick it into a charger, it'll suck all the electrons off the positive side, and it'll shove them back into the negative side, and we can start all over again. But here's what's interesting. In this, here's the part I want to get across. Maybe you're bored to tears. That's okay. Electrons leave the negative side of the battery, and they go to the positive side of the battery, and that's the only way they move. In this circuit, electrons only move one way. They move from what side of the battery to which side do they go? I'm telling you this is going to be on the quiz tomorrow. Is it okay if I tell you the questions that are going to be on the quiz tomorrow? Is it okay? Okay, 2 people are nodding their head up and down. Everybody else don't listen. So which side of the battery do electrons leave, and then which side do they go towards? Yeah, they always leave the negative side, and they always try to go to the positive side, period. The only time they do anything different is when you're charging the battery, which we're not going to talk about today. So anything I put in this circuit, this light bulb, electrons are only going to go through it one way. Now the good news, light bulbs, they don't care. They don't care. You can run electricity through an old school light bulb, like in an old flashlight, or an old regular round bulb that's not a compact fluorescent, it's not LED, it's an old school light bulb. I mean, the kind that's in the back bathroom that nobody ever uses. Does anybody have a bathroom at home that nobody ever... Don't answer that question. In any case, those kind of light bulbs don't care which way the electricity goes. Let's talk about car stereos. How many people like car stereos? They're in the top 10,000 things you like on planet Earth. 2 or 3 of you. Okay, great. All right. I like car stereos. Why? I bet you someone in here can guess. Someone guess why Mr. Johnson likes car stereos. So he can keep going. What kind of music would I be listening to? AC/DC. All right. If I had a gold star, I would almost give it to you because you had to take 3 times to answer it. Yeah, I like car stereos because I can listen to AC/DC. I got my last phone. I kept as an MP3 player, and it's got 2,700 different AC/DC songs. I've got all their albums and all their live albums and their recording of 17 different concerts. So I can just sit in my car for 3 years driving to and from work, and I don't have to listen to anything except AC/DC. In fact, I even keep a wig in my car. I put it on my head, and that way when I'm head banging, the hair's flopping around, it's way more fun. Because my hair's so short when I do head banging stuff, you know, I can't really go air guitar with 2 hands in my car. I have to drive with one, but I can air guitar with the other hand. No, I don't have one of those cars. I don't have enough electrons. All right, so DC circuits, electricity only goes in one direction. If I put a car stereo in here, let's see. Let's get rid of that. And I put a car stereo in here instead. The color of this wire right here is going to be black. I'll tell you in a second. And the color of this wire right here is going to be red. Because when it comes to cars, you always hook the black side of a radio up to the negative side of the battery, and you hook the red side to the positive. And in fact, on cars, if you go and look at the battery itself, the positive side of the battery is usually marked red. Oh, I can do it. Look at this. Check it out. Black. Woohoo! And the negative side is black. So they're going to make this wire coming out of the stereo is going to be black. And this, sorry, I did it backwards. My apologies. because car stereos do not want electrons to go through them backwards. It's like having a one-way street. Think about it. In a car, if you drive on a one-way street in the wrong direction, are you likely to be happy if you do it for very long, especially if you're driving the speed limit? Why not, Matthew? Why would you not be happy? Well, why would you be? You turn down a one-way street. You say, I don't care, I'm still going to go fast. Are you going to be happy in the next 30 seconds or a minute going the wrong way on a one-way street? Are you going to be happy? Are you? Huh? Why would you be unhappy? I'm asking Matthew. I want to know why Matthew would be unhappy. You can do it, man. I know you can. Have you ever driven up a one-way street going in the wrong direction? Have you seen somebody drive up a street in the wrong direction? What do you think would happen if you were standing on a one-way street and you saw somebody going in the wrong direction? What do you think is about to happen? A collision, yeah, between two cars, hopefully not you, the pedestrian. Yeah, so going the wrong direction is a very bad idea. In the case of a car stereo, you're probably going to fry it. You're going to hook it up, and inside, things will happen and get so hot, it will emit smoke. It's the term, oh yeah, man, I installed that car stereo and I smoked it. And it's not like they rolled it into a cigarette-like device and lit it on fire. That is not the kind of smoke that they were talking about. They're talking about they fried it. And we're not talking fried chicken, which is kind of fun, but we'll talk about that after class. What's that? You're welcome to go after you leave class. Well, you know what? I have to tell you that you have to go back to your home high school after class. Then after you leave high school, it's not up to me to tell you what to do. If you want to go to, if you need a loan so you can go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, ask Matthew. After class, ask him after class. So direct current, electricity, so when I hook this stereo up, I better hook it up with the right, it's called polarity. So the black wire goes to the negative side of the battery and the red wire goes to the positive side of the battery, because some things you hook up in electrical circuits, they need for the electricity to only go one way, and in that case, it's going to be direct current. The other thing that's great about direct current circuits is that you can power them with a battery, because as a battery discharges, which side of the battery does the electrons leave? The negative side. And which side do the electrons try to go to? Positive. And that's the only way the electrons go while the battery is discharging. So what kind of a circuit are we going to have if there's a battery in it? You got two choices there. AC, DC, or Van Halen. Yeah, you're wrong. You're going to get that wrong. So if batteries are going to be found in DC circuits. Okay, AC circuits. An AC generator, instead of looking like a battery, it has a sine wave in it. Yeah, oh, there's a sine wave. Woohoo! Here, I'm going to draw this switch closed. So here's a closed switch. Now we'll put another light bulb in there. But this is a symbol for an AC generator. And I don't care if you put the dots on it or not. Alternating current you cannot generate alternating current from a battery. You could take that direct current and stuff it into something. But an alternating current generator, half of the time the electrons are going in one direction, and the other half of the time the current or the electrons are flowing in the opposite direction. So if I'm watching here at this light bulb, half the time the electrons are going in one direction and half the time the electrons are going in the other direction. Literally, if I looked at this sine wave and made it really big over here, if I put this at 0, this would be plus and this would be negative. This plus and negative over here is just telling you the direction the electrons are flowing. Half of the time from here to here, half of the time the electrons are going in one direction, and half of the time the electrons are going in the opposite direction. So this symbol right here is a sine wave. You don't have to write it down. You don't have to write it down. You don't have to write down the word sine wave. That's telling you that this is producing alternating current. And the time here in household current is 1/60th of a second from there to there. We're very familiar with alternating current. Have you ever plugged in a microwave to heat up a frozen burrito? Remain seated if you've never done that. See, everyone shares a common experience in this class that we have all heated up frozen burritos in microwaves. And usually, at some point in your life, you forgot to cover it and it explodes, and then mom and or dad or your legal guardian asks you to clean up the microwave. Hey, Frederica, come here and clean up the microwave. I know that was your frozen burrito that did that. Oh, you forgot to take it out of the foil paper. In any case, that microwave is plugged into the wall. Household current in the United States and everywhere else on the planet is alternating current. If you look up at power lines for half of a 60th of a second, so that literally means that this distance right here is 1/120th. What's it doing? Stop it. So for half of 1/60th of a second, the electrons are going in one direction. That's a 120th. And then for 120th of a second, they're going in the opposite direction. So if you looked up at that wire and you could be superpower, you could see things at the atomic level, you'd see electrons going in that direction, and then they stop. And then they go in the opposite direction. And then they stop. And then they go in the first direction. And then they stop. And back and forth and back and forth. And each back and forth, in the United States, that takes 1/60th of a second, or you could say 60 of these back and forths happen every second. And you don't have to write this down, okay? You don't have to write this down. So that means that's called 60 hertz. Hertz means how many times per second. In Japan, it's 50 hertz. In Europe, it's 60 hertz. So everywhere around the world, almost everybody's either 50 or 60 hertz. Interestingly enough, in the United States, our voltage for most things is 120. How about for your electric dryer? That's 240. You know that big giant plug that you grabbed a piece of wire and stuck in there as a kid when you were 3 years old, when your folks weren't looking? Am I the only one that did that? Okay, maybe I'm the only one that did that. It explains a lot to my electrochemical development of my brain. So we're used to alternating current. Fluorescent light bulbs work off of alternating current. They also work off of high voltage, but right now we're just talking about the electricity going back and forth. In cars, the battery is in a DC system. The alternator produces electricity to go to one direction. Most things in today's cars run off of DC. Same thing for airplanes. But household electricity is alternating current. Question? How come cars and airplanes run off of DC? That is a great question, because we need a battery to start the engine, right? Okay, there is no such thing as an alternating current battery. All batteries only store direct current. They want to get from one side of the battery to the other, and during discharge, they only go in one direction. So if you say, okay, I got to have a starter motor and a battery. Okay, now I got to charge the battery, so I'm going to make an alternator, and it also is a DC alternator because I'm charging a DC battery. When I think of a radio to put in that car, should I make the radio run off of DC or AC? DC, because I already have a DC system. So we make light bulbs that run off of 12 volts DC that go in your car. We have car stereos that run off of 12 volts DC that run in your car. And there's, I'm sure, car computers that run off of 12 volts DC. Does that make sense? If there was an alternating current battery, it might be a different story. Even when you look at giant airliners, I'm not going to get too deep in it, but in giant airliners, they'll have a battery to start a little jet engine, and then the little jet engine provides compressed air to start the big engines, and then the big engines have only AC generators on them. But you still got to have a DC battery to start the little jet engine in the first place. But we're not going to, when you go to aircraft mechanics school, you can learn a whole lot more about aircraft alternating current systems on big old honking airplanes. Okay, you got to have three things for an electrical circuit, and I've been drawing them for you. You got to have a source of battery, a source of electrical power, which is either a battery or an alternating current, and you got to have conductors or wires, and you got to have something to use up the power. So here I have a source of electrical power have a load which uses electrical power. And then I got my wires or conductors. You got to have those three things no matter what, whether it's AC or DC, whether it's light bulbs or stereos, whether it's a giant jet or a little tiny moped. Has anybody driven a little tiny moped? I had a Honda 150 motorcycle once. It was about as big as a moped. If I leaned down really, really low, I could get that thing up to almost 50 miles an hour if there was no wind. My mom, she didn't know I bought it. I went off to college and bought the motorcycle because she would never let me ride the mini bikes across the street with the other kids. So I showed her. I went against my mother's wishes. Don't do that. So it doesn't matter whether it's a battery or an alternating current generator. It doesn't make any difference. This could be a light bulb. It could be a stereo. It could be anything. And the conductor doesn't even have to be a wire. It doesn't even have to be a wire. On cars and airplanes, regardless of what size they are, this shows we got to have two sets of conductors to go out to the power source and to the power source and from the power source. But we can save a lot of weight and you don't have to draw this. What if we just connected this to the chassis? Let's connect this light bulb to the chassis of the car or airplane. Of course, we'll put it through a switch. The electrons can get from this generator all the way over to the light bulb because this symbol here is a ground symbol, and that means it's connected to the metal of the car or the metal of the airplane. And the metal of the car or the airplane is now one of the conductors. But we didn't have to install a wire to do that. We save weight. And we save cost. And this isn't just airplanes, this is cars. There is one wire going out to the light bulb in the back of your car, and then another wire comes out of the light bulb, and it gets bolted to the metal of the car. So you don't have to have one that runs all the way back. And generally speaking, this ground is on the negative side of the battery, and the side that has the real wire, that's the positive side. And I'm actually now going to erase this wire. So if you ever see this ground symbol right there, that means that that wire is connected to the metal of the vehicle, whether it's a car or an airplane. And now the metal of the vehicle is acting as that wire. So based on this diagram right here, electrons are leaving the negative side of the battery. They're going into the chassis of the car or the alumina of the airplane, going through the vehicle, and then jump and then go into the light bulb and then through a wire to get to the positive side of the battery. Did I lose anybody there? All right. Oops, wrong one. So, current flow is another word for electron flow. If somebody says how much current is going through a wire, they're really asking how many electrons are going through a wire. But we usually don't say how many electrons. Somebody made up a name and they call it amps. They call it amps. We're not going to worry about this digit right there. Don't worry about that. So amps is just number of electrons that are moving. It's kind of like a water pipe. And you said, how many gallons per minute are going through that water pipe? It's a volume. It's a quantity of actual things. Same thing with amps. Amps is a volume of electrons. It's a certain number of electrons. And I'll probably end up calling it current, or we're not going to call it amperes. We're not going to worry about it. And we've already got current in there. Okay, fine. We've already talked about that electrons always move from where there's too many electrons to where there's not enough electrons. That means they're moving from where it's negative to positive. The good news is, after about 20 days of lecture, 2 hours a day, we're going to go to the lab. And then the last 3 days of the semester, we're going to actually touch electricity. Oh, wait, sorry, no, we're not going to do 20 days. That would be terrible, wouldn't it? That means we'd have a quiz every day for 20 days in a row. Yay, I like Okay, no, anyways. And I already said, it's a quantity of electrons. It's how many electrons, instead of how many gallons are going through a pipe in a second, it's how many electrons are going through a wire in a second. And look at that. You don't have to write down you don't have to write this down. It's true that it's similar to gallons per hour going through water. I like to use water to help understand electricity because they operate similar about 90% of the time. And then about 10% of the time it's like, that doesn't work. All right. So look at this word right here, complete circuit. The complete circuit, that's what I've been drawing most of the time here. So here's this switch. This switch, the way here, put in my light bulb here. This switch right now here is open. And that is not a complete circuit. Very good. Open means it's an incomplete circuit. If I want it to be an open circuit, if I want it to be a complete circuit, then I need to close the switch. So this is on equals the switch is closed equals complete circuit. So based on what Mr. Gallagher told me last semester and what Mr. Luque told me this semester, some of you don't want to be in aviation, some of you want to be aircraft mechanics, and some of you want to be pilots. And some of you want to grow up. Just to be really clear, you can't be a pilot and grow up at the same. You got to pick one or the other. Aircraft mechanics, you can get to about age 20 in your head, and then you got to slow down. In any case, thanks for grinning, Catherine. You were grinning, weren't you, Catherine? Just so you know, there's no extra points for laughing at my silly jokes. Well, so that I only allowed you to be in 3. Maybe there's a fourth option. You don't want to do anything in aviation. You want to be a pilot. You want to be a mechanic, or what's the last one? I want to be like Mr. Johnson. See, I didn't mention that because nobody wants to be like Mr. Johnson. Although you get to wear a really cool white lab coat and pretend you're a mad scientist, and you get to harass students in a professional manner. There's a lot of advantages to being an instructor. All right, so a complete circuit, in order for electrons to move, you can't have the switch open. You can't be off. When you flip that switch off, you're actually separating conductor, and the electrons cannot jump again across that air gap. Now the circuit is open. No electrons flow when the circuit is open. They only will move if the circuit is closed. Hey, that works out great. That means switches work. We need switches to work. That way, when we turn the key in our car and pull the key out, the engine doesn't keep running and the stereo isn't running because I've got that AC/DC blaring. Somebody's going to steal my car because they like AC/DC so much. The one that sounds like AC/DC when you go outside because I hot-wired my stereo to never turn off. I've got 4 batteries in the trunk, so it can run for between 24 and 36 hours with the radio on and the I got to turn the subwoofers off. So that way it just runs with AC/DC playing. I thought about putting a speaker on the outside of the car, but just so I could hear it while I'm in my office. But I don't think my office mate would like that. You know, I've never asked him. I've never heard him play AC/DC on his computer. So my guess is that he's not into hard rock. Hard rock. I could ask him if he's into thrash metal, but thrash metal is better. Well, you're welcome to your opinion. Even if you're wrong, that's okay with me. You don't have to agree with me. So the last thing on this slide I want to talk about is a short circuit. Short circuit is an electrical term that's very important. It means electrons got back to the battery, but they didn't go where you wanted them to. So for instance, if I took a wire and connected it from here to there, the electrons could come up at this intersection and they could pick, do I want to go through the wire or do they want to go through the light bulb? And electrons always take the path of least resistance. So if it's a lot harder to go through the light bulb than to go through a wire, almost all of them are going to go through the wire. Hey Fred, there's a shortcut over here. No. Hey Mabel, don't go through the light bulb. It's too hard to get through the light bulb. Okay, let's go through the wire. Should I use Wilma? Should I do Fred and Wilma? Is that better than Fred and Mabel? How about Homer and Marge? Is that more, Fred and Wilma from 1960s? Anybody remember cartoons from the 1960s? They show them on this channel called YouTube. Do they have them on the Cartoon Network? What? Scooby-Doo. That was totally early 70s, but I'll accept that. Scooby-Doo. Yeah, I forget Scrappy-Doo. You know, the little cousin, the little nephew? That just ruined that show. So if you watch Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo comes on, just turn it on. Just turn it on. So a short circuit is when the electricity doesn't go through where you planned. Tom and Jerry is like 1940s, and it's violence incarnate. Because Tom is always getting creamed, right? He tries to eat the mouse, but generally the mouse hits him over the head with a hammer. So, sometimes that's true, but I think they're just plotting inside of their brain how they're going to cream each other next time. But that's just a personal opinion. I do have a Tom and Jerry blog. Just type Tom and Jerry blog, John C. Johnson, and you'll find my Tom and Jerry blog. Oh my gosh. It's time for a break. So what I'm going to do is pause. So you can relax. I think that's enough for one day, your first day of electricity. So we're going to call it quits right there.